Welcome to episode 81 of the Band Hive Podcast.
You're listening to the Band Hive Podcast, the number one online resource for DIY bands to learn about the music business and touring. If you want to turn your band into a lean, mean touring machine, you're in the right place. Now, let's get this show on the road.
It is time for another episode of the Band Hive Podcast. My name is James Cross, and I'm not here with Matt Hose of Alive in Barcelona, but we have a very special guest, Todd Barriage of Theatria. How's it going today, Todd?
It's going all right. How are you doing?
Glad to hear that, and thanks for asking. I'm doing really well. Let's jump right in. So, Todd, you're releasing a new song in just a couple days on June 18th called Daddy Issues. Let's get the elephant out of the room and talk about that song first. What can you tell us about the song?
Sure. So from a lyrical standpoint, my guitarist, Chris, thought it was about maybe a previous relationship I had had with someone who had daddy issues, and that I was maybe making light of that person's like familial problems. But what it is, it's about my own daddy issues, but not with my father. It's a very close friend that I had who maybe wasn't quite like a father to me, but definitely like a big brother role model kind of figure. So the song kind of covers the disillusionment with going from a place of adoration and admiration. You taint that with just a pinch of betrayal, and it becomes a really scornful kind of pity is kind of where you end up, or where I ended up anyway, emotionally. So, and the reason I went with the title Daddy Issues on it, within our group, this guy and I kind of went by Papa and Stepdad, were kind of our nicknames. Him being Papa. So with him being the father figure, it just sort of made sense for me. So I had the title of the song and the instrumental written before I had the lyrics done, but I already knew what the lyrics were going to be.
Yeah, you knew what road you were taking on that.
Yeah, I was feeling a thing when I wrote it, so I waited a year to finish writing the vocals because I didn't want to tackle it from the place I was at, where I was like really angry and bitter still. So I sat on it for a year and then finished. So I had the chorus done, and then I finished the verses with a little bit more clarity on it. And I feel like that helped me write it sort of into a story rather than it just being like a word vomit of angst. So
Yeah. Man, well, that's obviously a lot to go into a song, and especially for, you know, the first single of your upcoming album, that is a very deep look right into you and the band as the first single of the album. You know, it's been a few years since Theatria released an album. I believe the last one was 2017. And going back, you guys have been together for over a decade now. So before we dive into the meat of the episode and talk about why you're here on the Band Hive Podcast, can you just share a little bit about your journey as a musician and a producer?
Yeah, so growing up, I didn't have like hobbies. I just basically played Donkey Kong Country and Super Mario World up until I was 12-ish, maybe 11. And then Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 came out, and the soundtrack of that sort of like turned me on to music in general. Tony Hawk 3 came out the following year, exposed me to AFI. And once I heard The Boy Who Destroyed the World, I was like, okay, I need to do this. Like, this is inspiring me. So that summer I learned how to play drums. And that would have been summer between grade 8 and grade 9 for me, around 2003. Then through high school, I played drums in a few different bands. The last one of note being We Are Adam West, which was a punk band 3-piece where I played drums and also sang. And that was the first one where I also produced, because we were broke. Especially at that point, I had moved out of my parents' house. So I was like extra broke because I had an apartment. So to record ourselves, my bass player Josh had this like little 4-channel mixer. And so we lined out into the mic input on his computer, where his brother had a pirated copy of Adobe Audition 1.5. So his brother was very busy, much too busy to record his little brother's, you know, crappy little punk band. So he allowed us to use his stuff to produce our own record. And so a lot of that was me and my friend Josh in tandem. And then what ended up happening was I just fell in love with the process. And so I got my own crappy little mixer and my own computer and my own pirated copy of Adobe Audition 1.5. In, the summer after grade 12, I started recording some local bands for like $20 a song. Did that for maybe a year. And then I never raised my rates because I didn't value myself or my work. So I was like, oh, this isn't sustainable. I quit music. I went to business school in 2010. And so I moved up to Toronto, which is a big city, and had the apartment to myself. And so there were 4 of us moving into the apartment. 2 of us moved up early, me and my friend Austin. So I just quit music. And in that month before school started, I'd written half of the first Theatria album, which was self-titled. And so the first song I wrote was The Weakest Man in the Room. And that's where I really started trying to make things sound good instead of just like getting things technically recorded. I started actually putting in the work and like finding guitar tones and getting drum sounds by using Fruity Loops to blend in like the Paramore snare sample and the Nickelback kick drum with Easy Drummer, and do that, bounce it out in 4-bar chunks until I had a song composed and roughly mixed, drums wise, and then I would do the rest in Adobe Audition, which is what I had been used to doing. So that's where I got my start in pursuing production. And then I think it was like the year after that, I dropped out of business school and started producing professionally.
That's awesome. So it was a pretty quick turnaround once you decided to go all in on it to going all in on it, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, you're either going to do it or you're not, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's really interesting that there's a lot of artists who self-produce, and for the audio version of the podcast, imagine me doing air quotes around that, but they don't really have the production experience. And for you, you are now a producer and engineer who plays music. You're not a musician who also produces, even though it started that way. So now that you have this production experience, does that affect how you write your songs? Does that affect the writing process?
Yeah, I'm more cognizant of arrangement and how frequencies will clash. You can put 2 things together and they're in the same key, but maybe they're overlapping a lot on the frequency spectrum. So I'm more prone to cut apart even before I demo it out. I'll already know this is going to clash with the vocal. So I spend a lot less time dilly-dallying in terms of like seeing what other parts will work. Because if I have a chord progression and a melody, I've already, half of my like lead guitar choices are just gone. They're off the table because I don't want them clashing with the lead. And it's made me more aware of dynamics. So like the new Theatria song, Daddy Issues, it's 1 chord progression for the entire song, which is something I never would have done before. It was always, this is the progression for the verse, and then it goes to this progression for the chorus, because without that production experience, I didn't have enough tinker time to realize that you can literally just open up the part and it's a new part. And that's something I picked up from listening to a lot of Kesha back in like 2014, 2015. I had a huge like Dr. Luke phase and Max Martin, and they do a lot of that. I noticed that each song, or at least the hits from those records, it was generally 1 chord progression that would just move up and down dynamically through the song, which at the time was mind-blowing to me. I was like, you can do that? Like, you can just have 1 thing and that's your song? And so that's something that I picked up on as a producer that I now apply to my own music.
Yeah. There's so many great examples of that. Like Weezer, Say It Ain't So, is the same chord progression. The bridge might be different if I recall, but the verses and chorus are all the same. Or going even a step further, Beastie Boys, Sabotage. It's 1 chord.
Oh, yeah.
It just got that little guitar riff and then the 1 chord. It's incredible.
And then it's the dynamics and the emotion that's actually making the song breathe. And like Damn It by Blink-182, I think in the chorus they half-time the progression, but it's the same progression. I mean, it was always there. I just never noticed it until it was a synth. Because it's so effortless and natural when a band's doing it. It didn't pique my ear as, oh, that's just 1 progression. I was like, oh, this song really hits me, where pop songs, I love them, but they don't hit me the same as rock songs. And I consider Sabotage a rock song. But yeah, so it totally retooled the way I view music as a songwriter. And whether that's for the better or for the worse, I don't know, or maybe it's just different, but it's definitely an effect that it's had on me.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I have to bring this up now with Daddy Issues. I've made 2 comparisons, Pierce the Veil and Senses Fail, which ironically, you don't listen to either of those bands. So obviously it's not a ripoff. It's just that it happened. But in my mind, that's a great thing because it shows me that your songwriting's on par with those bands on its own. It's independent. You're not just saying, hey, I like this, I'm going to copy it. You're actually doing what those incredibly successful bands are doing.
Yeah, at the very least, if it's in the same family, it's bare minimum, it's like the ugly cousin. But even that's in the same family. Like that's, no matter what, that's a win.
Yeah, and the thing is that if you are putting out music that sounds commercially viable, that's what makes it commercially viable. There's so many artists who self-produce and, in my opinion, lack the self-awareness to say, we sound like a garage band in a genre that's typically highly polished. Like, especially with a lot of pop punk bands, they'll have a very rough 90s pop punk sound. It's like, yeah, that worked 30 years ago, but now pop punk has shifted. You're not doing classic rock, you're doing pop punk. You have to adjust with the times.
Yeah, especially it's the drum sounds with modern pop punk. Like, if you don't have those drums, get out.
We could rabbit hole on this all day, two production nerds sitting on a video call. As much fun as that would be, I think we need to serve the listeners here. So I'm going to steer in a slightly different direction because you are doing something that so many artists want. You are making a living from your creativity. Now, it's not, solely from your band, but it's from being in a band, being a full-time producer, working with clients, and ultimately, in 2021, it's not super realistic for somebody to make a full-time living off of a band unless they become superstars or they do other stuff like create content on Patreon or provide a service like guitar lessons or production work or anything under that umbrella that adds value to people to the extent that people will give you money. So what advice would you give to artists who want to make a living with their music but haven't come to the realization that they might need to branch out and open up other income streams that are related but aren't just writing and releasing songs?
Okay, I'm going to start. This is like a life lesson that ultimately would tie in with being successful in any field, but I feel like this isn't discussed nearly enough on any sort of like success-oriented platform. Learn the difference between being nice and being kind, and be kind. So that's the first foot in the door of any scenario, is just be a good person. Don't be a doormat. That's being nice. But try to do things that are mutually beneficial in whatever scenario you end up in. Don't try to think of how you can take advantage. That's one way to get ahead, but it might not be a long-term solution. But for me, it's worked just to be kind and try to think, say when I'm producing a record, I want to make the best album possible so that it looks good in my portfolio. Also, the band ends up with the best album possible. That's a pure win-win, right? Or when you're an artist and you're playing a show, try to, if you have a relationship with a promoter, what Theatria did with a local promoter around us is we had a guarantee that was unique to this promoter. And it was, you give us this dollar amount, we will make damn sure there's at least 100 bodies in that room every time. And if you want to play the percentage game, I can show you, we will come out on top if you want to play the percentage game. We will go out of our way to double the number of people there so we get more money, like spitefully even. So let's just do this safe. You know what you're paying us. You know what we're bringing in. The audience has a good time. You make your money, Mr. Promoter. We don't lose our gas money. We make money on merch over there, sort of thing. So there's a lot of dynamics when you're working with people. Just try to figure out what's mutually beneficial and, try not to be a sociopath, basically. Beyond that, it's just a lot of hard work, especially if you're self-producing, which more and more people are, your own music. Do not handicap your result by saying, oh, well, I wrote it and recorded it and mixed it and mastered it, so you can't expect it to be perfect. Well, why not? And then you branch that off into marketing. Like, you can't half-ass the marketing just because you whole-ass the production. Like, you gotta just go all in on the whole thing, which is, what I said earlier when you'd mentioned, oh, you just kind of started producing. It's like, yeah, you're either doing it or you're not. So the most important thing is to do it. And a lot of people spend a lot of time deliberating, a lot of time not even making a plan on, say, like a song release, but like choosing a type of plan. They'll spend a month just deciding the rough how, and then a week figuring out the semantics. It's like, that's not going to work. You need to just pick a direction, and it doesn't matter if it's the wrong one. You can find out later. Do the wrong one the best way possible. Figure out what worked, and like learn and grow on the next one from there. A lot of people spend, I think anyway, too much time dilly-dallying and just burning their tires instead of just going out there and getting your music in people's ears, which is the most important part.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things I want to touch on there. The first one being what you said about people who really make excuses, saying, well, I did everything myself, it's not going to be great. And I'm a massive proponent for outsourcing. If you aren't the best at something, outsource it. And that's why you have clients, Todd, because you're a better engineer than those clients are, and they know that.
Yeah, because I help them, like in terms of like being kind. As a producer, when they're demoing and they have like mixed questions, I'm not going to like hold my secrets back. I'm like, oh, I did this. And so like they can get inside my head as a producer, and that better serves the record in the end. So
yeah, absolutely. And there are so many artists who have that sense of pride in doing everything themselves poorly, and would rather do everything poorly than let somebody else touch their baby. And it's like, that's great, but don't expect the song to be the next big hit. And a lot of them have that unrealistic expectation. So I think that's going to a deeper level. Kind of what you're alluding to is that artists need to have realistic expectations. Like if an artist is doing everything themselves and they're not marketing it, they need to realize this probably isn't going to take off. We're not going to get discovered and get a label deal or get on a Spotify curated playlist, all that kind of stuff.
And that's all fine. Just you need to know that's what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the reason that we changed the name of the podcast. I don't know if I've ever talked about this before, but the old name kind of made it sound like we were saying that bands who take themselves seriously are better than bands who don't take themselves seriously. And that's not what we're about. We're here to provide a resource for artists who want to make a career out of music. If you just want to play music and hang out with your friends, that's totally fine. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, that's super valid.
But don't expect to be the next Green Day or the next My Chem or the next Fall Out Boy. That takes a ton of effort. That's a full-time job. And if you already have a full-time job, that's 2 full-time jobs. Like,
yeah,
that's what you got to do. And there are artists who will go out and do that. So on that note, Todd, you spent hundreds of hours, literally a full-time job, recreating AFI's masterpiece, Sing the Sorrow.
Yes, I did.
It was painfully detailed.
Yeah.
I listened to it and I'm like, this sounds like AFI. Like the vocal timbre is a little bit different because it's your own voice.
Yeah, nothing you can do about that.
But instrumentally, it's almost exactly the same. And that must have been extremely fulfilling for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, like even if I released it and no one liked it, just knowing that I did it, like that was sort of the thing for me. Like I wanted, Jerry Finn's one of my favorite producers of all time. And obviously I can't go get a crash course from him. So the next best thing is like, okay, I'm going to recreate one of his records and see what I learn along the way.
That's amazing. And for those who don't know, Jerry Finn, great producer. Unfortunately, he passed away in, I believe it was late 2008, early 2009, sometime around then. Most big producers these days have a course you can go check out. Jerry Finn obviously doesn't, because that was before online courses were really a thing.
Yeah. He didn't even really do interviews. Like there's nothing.
Yeah. And it kind of seems like so many amazing producers don't do interviews because 1, they're so busy, and 2, they're just like, I don't want to talk to people.
That's it.
I want to make music. Like, leave me alone. I'm a hermit.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I don't know if that's the reason behind Jerry Finn not doing interviews, but it's quite plausible.
From what I gather, he was a workaholic. I imagine he didn't have the time and energy.
Yes. Like, why spend time talking to somebody when you can spend time making something sound amazing?
Yeah.
So for artists who want to self-produce but are just getting started and, they don't really know how to produce, would you recommend recreating an album like Sing the Sorrow, or maybe even just one song from their favorite artist?
It's like when you're first learning, say, to draw. Now, you don't want to get in the habit of tracing. You don't want to be a trace artist. But there's a reason in like grade 4 art class, the teacher just throws up a picture of Van Gogh on the overhead projector, and it's like, all right, everyone, do this. and you just do your crappy 9-year-old rendition of this classic painting, and you pick up some techniques, like, whatever it is. If you learn pointillism, you're going to recreate something using dots, and it's the production / arrangement, because they're very hand in hand, version of that. It's in my opinion, if you're the kind of person who learns by tinkering in general, it's the only way to truly understand what makes a sound is to recreate it from the ground up yourself.
Yeah. I have to point out that your Canadian is showing. I was homeschooled, so caveat, I don't know for sure. But in the States, from my understanding, art class is not like that at all.
No? Oh, man.
If you're lucky enough to have art class.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. But I think that's great that they teach you to express yourself that way by saying, like, learn these techniques and then go do your own thing. That's incredible. And I'm sure the benefits for you were along the lines of you learned how to make a Jerry Finn record.
Yep.
But you also gained a ton of attention from doing that because you released it commercially, essentially. You had a release plan for it. It's on Spotify. You were dropping weekly videos for
5 months. It was a while.
How much of a carryover did you see? Because I know everybody in the AFI community was sharing it. How much of that did you see carry over to Theatria? Did you see an influx of new fans when you did that project?
So the Theatria social media scene is very dead. Like we don't post, and that'll change. Like by the time this airs, we'll have probably started posting stuff for Daddy Issues, but like we haven't had anything going on for a while. So regardless of that, our social media numbers have doubled in that time frame. So like on Facebook, I think we went, and a large part of this is our bass player is really good at just trying to get us out there despite the lack of content we have. But I think our Facebook has like close to 3,000 followers on it, which to my recollection, like say a year ago, it was maybe 1,000. And then our Instagram is same, quite dead, and we predated Instagram's popularity. So we had like 50 Instagram followers. Now I think we have close to 200. That's just from the AFI stuff, because it's not like the band's doing anything. And even my personal Instagram, it went from, I think, about 600 in January up to, I think it's about 1,400 now. So like I've doubled or tripled, and I trust that will carry over once Theatria has stuff. Because right now it's literally 3 posts, and it's like our previous 3 records as album art. It's a dead page as of May 29th, but in June it'll start ramping up. We've been backlogging a lot of studio footage and stuff.
Oh, that's the way to do it.
But yeah, there's been a ton of carryover. I think just like musically, like almost all of our songs have gang vocals. So there's lots of things that like older mid AFI fans will appreciate about what we're doing that maybe AFI doesn't do anymore as much, like the gang vocals or the AFI song progression, right? Where it's verse, chorus, moody bridge, chorus out. We've got a bunch of those on the record. Daddy Issues doesn't super tie into that, but we have woes. We've got woes in the end of the song. So there's lots of little things kind of throughout. But I don't know, it's very strange just the amount of attention. Like I didn't expect AFI HQ to share it all, much less any of it. I didn't expect any of that. I didn't expect them to interview me. I thought that was real. I still think that's really cool. Like that blows my mind. Like it's this website I've been reading since I was a child, and it's they're posting my face. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I mean, especially like you mentioned, not having a social media presence.
None.
And still doubling your following on every platform. That's huge. And I mean, I have to say, for all the artists out there, don't neglect your social media presence or your social media profiles will get daddy issues.
Yes. Oh, 1,000%. That's great joke, but 100% true. And that's the thing. The reason that we've been stockpiling studio footage instead of posting it is we're releasing Daddy Issues, and it's not, strictly speaking, the first single from the record. It's the first song from the recording sessions of the album that's coming out, but there's like a small chance it doesn't even make the album. Like we're recording 14, and it's going to be an 11 or 12 track record, so I'm not saying it's getting the axe, but like we don't know. We're still in sort of that phase of development, but we didn't want to start hyping up the album with nothing of value to be waiting for you there. So we're releasing Daddy Issues, as like that's the net that's going to catch you. And as we start hyping up the album through the summer, it's not like, why do I care? Like, you haven't done anything in 5 years. Why do I care about your new record? It's like, okay, you did a song a month ago and it's pretty dope. So yeah, I'm stoked to, wait to hear what comes from the record. So it's basically like a marketing bedrock more than it is a single, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And it's a great strategy too, because that way you don't necessarily have to wait until the album is completely finished to start dropping songs. Because that's, a typical release strategy is finish the album, start dropping songs a couple months in advance. And what you mentioned with keeping the studio footage and just holding on to it until you're ready for the big push, that is perfect. That's what, every major artist does, and that's what every DIY artist should do. If people want to hear more about that, episode 19 of the Band Hive podcast, we had Infinite Signal, whose hoodie I'm wearing right now, actually. They were on the show to talk about their latest EP. So go check out that episode. It's called How to Make Your Band Stand Out Using Tactics the Major Labels Have Mastered. And that's all about creating a promo plan for your next release, keeping in mind that, it might take a year to record and release an album, but you want to be pushing it only in those last 2 months. Like, you want content the whole year, but you don't want to be talking about your new album the whole year. You want that in like a 2-month focused push, single 1, single 2, album, single 3, or EP in their case. So I think it's stellar that you're doing that as well, because that's the model. And as much as I hate to say this, that's what everyone does. And until somebody figures something better out, that's what everyone who's not doing it needs to do.
Yeah, and I like the model. What I did with the Sing the Sorrow rollout, where it was like a song every week, that was fun. It was like this parade that went on for several months, and maybe doing it every week and maybe doing, as many songs as there were might be a little much. Like I felt a little burnt out by the end. I could tell the audience was like getting there. But, if you can condense that down to say 10 songs and do it every 2 weeks, I think that's a great way to keep the momentum and sort of snowball it, instead of like even 5 years ago, the model was drop a single, drop the album, and then that's it, you're done. Like, you go and tour and stuff, and then you drop more music videos and whatnot, but the content aspect of it wasn't as much of a focus, and that content-based relationship wasn't so much of a focus back then. Where now I like it because it's, we're releasing, I want to say 10 videos related to daddy issues in June.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Can you give us a run through of what those 10 videos are, at least as many as you remember off the top of your head?
Yeah. So basically it's like a 10-day crunch. And that's just basically we have 10 days to remind people we exist. And then we can start hyping up the album after that. Because right now it's just about the single and that we're alive. Because that's sort of where we are right now. Because we've been dead for so long. So it's the music video, obviously, on the 18th. Next day, lyric video. Next day, drum playthrough video. Next day, drum mixing video. Next day, bass mixing video, guitar mixing video, vocals. Probably going to skip mastering because my mastering chain is depressing. And and I think at that point, we're back to the next Friday. And then acoustic music video, acoustic lyric video. And that might be it. That might be the last one. There might be one more that I'm blanking on. But basically, it's 10 days, 10 videos. And maybe it's a merch video that I'm forgetting. Because like we've got some shirts that just say daddy issues right across the chest. But I think they're great. We'll see how they carry over. It's a weird inside joke that's not even an inside joke. Like
that sounds like, depending on your demographic, it might need to be booty shorts as well.
That is something that's been on my radar. We're also thinking condoms. Like actually, like I'm talking to a company. Once we're done here, I'm emailing them back to confirm the order.
That's amazing.
I'm thinking, a batch of ones that say daddy issues and a batch with like my face on them. I think that's the move.
That might lead to some interesting conversations.
Yeah, I'm hoping so.
Oh yeah, that's this band I listen to. You should go check it out. Hey, I can put it on right now.
The condom or the band?
Both. Oh, dude, I love creative promo ideas like that. It's something that people don't do enough. They don't think outside the box. And you're thinking outside the box.
There's no live events, right? So like we can't do a 10-day tour. So let's do the next best thing and just do one, but globally and everyone all at once instead of, just Idaho here and just Calgary here and, whatever.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing that having those 10 videos, essentially you're rehashing the same thing 10 times. It's the same piece of content. It's what's called content replication, where you're taking the same piece of content and showing it in a different way. The tutorial videos, the lyric videos, the acoustic version. It's all about the same piece of content.
Well, it's about the same piece of art, but it's unique pieces of content, is how I look at it.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it for sure.
Yeah, the lyric video gives a different vibe than the performance video. The mixing videos are a whole different, it's an hour of me rambling.
Yeah, that's a different demographic. It's for the nerds like me who want to see what went into the song.
Exactly.
But it's a way for you to stay top of mind. And so many artists say, well, I don't know what to post. I don't have any content. It's like, well, you have a song, right? So do a behind the scenes. Do an acoustic version. There's, I think it was Ari Herstand's book that I was reading where it said, every song you release needs to have at least 3 videos. The music video, the lyric video, and just the audio, the album art with like a visualizer and audio, and that's it. You have 3 versions right there already. And then you can go and do all the other versions you're doing, Todd. But at the very minimum, people should have 3 versions to push the song, because maybe one of them takes off on the YouTube algorithm and the other 2 don't. Having 3 chances of getting found by the algorithm is better than having 1 chance.
And that's something people are afraid of, like diluting views, right? Like, oh, if I release 3 videos, they're each going to get 1/3 of the views. And that's just not true. Like, to jump back to AFI, because they're the only band I can talk about with a degree of confidence, they released each of their songs they've been releasing in their album cycle. You've got exactly like what you're saying. You've got the music video, the visualizer, and then just the song. That's the game. And I've watched all 3 of them unwittingly. I didn't even seek them out. I'm just like, oh, this is new and in my feed, and I click it. I'm like, I've heard this, but I haven't seen this. So I'm going to stick around to see the new thing, because the internet is so visually oriented. And I feel like musicians think of their content as music oriented, and it's not. Like, the song has to be good, obviously. And when you're creating it, it's the most important thing. But when it comes to market it, you've already made the good thing. So make visually appealing things to keep doling the same song out in a way that's meaningful. You're providing a new experience each time they go in and watch it.
Yeah. And one thing that, if people don't already know this, YouTube is the 2nd largest search engine in the world, behind Google, which owns YouTube. But that means that if somebody's looking for something, 1, they're going to Google it, and 2, they're going to YouTube it.
That's the order.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily only apply to music. That's like how to repair a lawnmower. You're either going to Google it or you're going to YouTube it. Yeah. And for music, it's the same thing.
I replaced the drum in my washing machine by Googling, not finding what I wanted, then YouTubing it. Like, it's so useful. Everyone's on it all the time. It's silly not to sort of take advantage of that.
Yeah. And there's videos for everything. The rabbit holes on YouTube are intense. Yeah. I started following this guy who drives buses because some of the buses he drives are old entertainer coaches, like tour buses.
That's sick.
And it's like, oh, I miss my days in a tour bus. I want to see what other tour buses look like. He's Canadian, by the way. So go Canada. But just the rabbit holes like that, people will find something that they can relate to and subscribe. Like, I subscribed. He's got like 3,000 followers. I'm like, I want to see more about buses and learn. Like, I used to live in a bus. This is cool. That's the kind of thing that people go for, like whatever is interesting to them. So if somebody's interested in your band, they're going to search for your band on YouTube, and hopefully there's multiple versions of videos out there. Hopefully there's behind the scenes stuff. There's mixing videos, there's acoustic videos, all that kind of stuff. So I'm beating a dead horse here since we've been talking about the same topic for like 10 minutes, but I think it's so important for artists to realize, like, put out videos, multiple videos.
That's one horse that needs to be beat.
Yeah, poor horse. Yeah, but I mean, videos are like the glue of your social media presence. That was a terrible horse joke, just for the record.
I thought it was great.
Well, thank you. Before I sidetrack us way off into like muddy waters, which I realize that's a band joke, but I'm not even going to go there. Let's turn back to Todd as the self-produced artist. And when it comes to Theatria, how does your production work play into the band dynamics?
See, it's hard to... I've always self-produced Theatria. Well, I guess our second EP I didn't produce, actually. So I guess I do have a frame of reference for when I'm not the producer. I know for me personally, it compounds the madness. You know what the madness is, right?
I have an idea, yeah. But why don't you tell the listeners?
Sure. So the madness is when you're embarking on a creative endeavor, and you may not know when it hits, but at some point you will know that it has hit. So on the creative band side, you're writing the record and you're writing song after song after song, and you don't even know what's good anymore because you've just been writing so much, and your existence becomes questionable. You don't even know that anything's real anymore. Like, what is bus fare? What is a grocery bag? It's all meaningless because it's not a chord progression. So you get the madness because you go crazy writing. And so I'm already in my own world relative to the outside world by the time we're done writing. And then I've got to produce a whole record. So the band is in its world because we've been songwriting. And then within that little world is my little producer world where I'm just out of it. Like, I don't know anything. You could say my name and it doesn't even register to my brain, that little dopamine spike when someone says your name and you're like, oh, that's me. I don't even get that anymore because I'm just so like the song. So it changes the band dynamic in that the band has to somewhat just humor my delusions a bit because we're all out of touch collectively, and then I'm out of touch of that out of touchness. So as far as the band dynamic goes, towards the end of it, it's always like can we make sure Todd's eating kind of thing. Just because it's been, by the time this record's done, it'll be a year and a half that I haven't had many thoughts that were outside of the record. Where being just a band member, air quotes, you get to write the song maybe 2 or 3 days a week. You're thinking of the album, or maybe the whole week, but you're not like actively invested in it. Where from the production standpoint, after we're done writing, I'm doing demos. And then after we're doing demos, I'm tweaking the writing. And then after that, we're recording. And once everyone leaves after tracking, I'm editing. So it's a lot. You've got to be committed to it, but it's good to have people you trust around you who understand what you're going for, understand the vision, and appreciate that all the insanity is in service of that vision. My bandmates do a really good job of keeping me in check. The past 3 days, I think I've worked a collective 6 hours on the album because we all just sort of decided Todd's getting in a mood. He needs to take a break. So they've been really good with that. And, trying to make sure it's not the Todd show is another big thing. When you're self-producing, especially when one guy... I don't write the majority of the songs, but a healthy share. I'd say probably a third of them come from my brain. Couple that with the fact I'm producing the whole way through. It would be very easy for me just to swing my manhood around and be like, this thing's mine. But having that creative respect and personal respect going in all directions, and having days where we get together and we're not making the record. We're going to go, to Chris's house and set a bunch of stuff on fire and just watch it be on fire. He's got a flamethrower. It's awesome. It's incredible. I don't know if I can say that publicly. I don't know what laws govern flamethrowers in Canada, but we have fun.
There's your content right there, burning some Nickelback merch.
Oh, man. Nickelback's not that bad. I'm going to say it.
No, I agree with that, but you do it for the meme. It's for the meme.
That's true.
And let me say this, I'm not the biggest Nickelback fan.
No, I'm not.
But they are incredible business people. Their management team, all of that is... I can't even put it into words. The meme around Nickelback is what's kept them relevant for the last 10 years.
Well, you know what I said earlier about, you make the song and the song's good and that's great, but now you've got to market it. And that's the most important part. I feel like no band is a testament to that more than Nickelback. Because an argument could be made. I'm not saying that I'm making it, but an argument could be made that their songs aren't even that great. And yet, here we are talking about Nickelback.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's the power of marketing.
It's the same thing with Creed. Everyone makes fun of Scott Stapp for the Jarl.
We're in a big Creed phase in the band right now.
That's amazing. Creed does the same thing. And as terrible as Trapped's opinions and rants and bullying are, they stayed in the limelight for a couple of years.
Enough to get rich.
Just by being bullies on Twitter. until they got banned. And now somebody took over their username and is like making troll tweets.
That's so wild.
Yeah, it's amazing. But Trapped is still trying to make music. And I don't know if they would be able to if they hadn't stayed relevant by being bullies. Now, there would have been much better ways to stay relevant. But all these bands that people make fun of are still being talked about. It's strange.
They've got it figured out. Trolling matters.
Yeah, they say all press is good press. Like Sticker Mule, one of my favorite brands. Their Twitter is literally just random posts about the Evil Bird, aka Twitter, and Lima Beans. Yes, the Evil Bird and Lima Beans.
I'm following them.
Their Twitter is amazing.
I saw your Sticker Mule post like minutes too late.
Oh no.
So I'm going to stay on top of that though.
For people who don't know, last night, which was May 28th at the time of recording, Sticker Mule did a custom packaging deal. It was 50 branded poly mailers for $29.
It's such a good deal.
Yeah, dude, I paid $25 for 50 plain white boxes. So $29 for branded mailers is incredible. Like normally it's like 80 something dollars.
And they look incredible.
Yeah. Now I'm a big fan of using boxes instead of mailers, but for something like a t-shirt, it's not always the best idea to use a box. Like it looks nicer to use a box, but it's not really cost effective. Granted, a box is more recyclable than a poly mailer, so it could go either way, depending on if your brand is green or not. I try to be as green as possible. Anyway, I'm absolutely sidetracking at this point, nerding out about people who tweet weird stuff like Sticker Mule. So yeah, Lima Beans and the Evil Bird. And now I'm not saying that a band should start tweeting about Lima Beans and the Evil Bird, but have something. Like I Fight Dragons, who we had on the podcast a few episodes ago, I think it was 77. If you want to check that out, it's bandhive.rocks/77. They have a meme, which is Chad Solo. Their drummer will never play a solo, so Chad Solo is just, the band will say, Chad Solo, and I'll turn and stare at the drummer, and he just sits there grinning and does nothing. And that is the Chad Solo. So having an internal joke like that, the fans can be a part of, because they're like, yeah, he's not going to do anything. Having that kind of in with your community is something I think that a lot of artists could take more advantage of. And I don't even remember why I thought of that and why this is relevant to what we were talking about.
We arrived here from Sticker Mule, I think.
Ah, yes, you're absolutely right. Because Sticker Mule has the end jokes of Lima Beans and the Evil Bird. Bands can have the jokes of Chad Solo or whatever it is for your band. Thank you for reminding me. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome.
Anyway, as we start to wrap things up here, my last big question for you is, how has self-producing changed your approach to producing other artists, to working with your clients?
Self-producing has given me a lot of insight into the relationship between songwriting and production. I feel like without that understanding, I'm just an engineer. And without, like I said, like an hour ago, just like being kind, because I know the value of just waking up disheveled and in my pajamas and grabbing a guitar and getting a guitar track out, sort of just like creating something of like a safe space for artists, which I don't think I would appreciate if I wasn't self-producing my own songs. I know a lot of guys who are like, oh, these guys show up and all they want to do is party. And it's like, well, if they're party dudes, why not just let them like do a bump before they do their take if that's how they roll? Like, obviously, don't let people rage in your studio. But if that's what they need to do to get where they need to be within reason, to have the best output, and the best ideas coming forth and the keeping the motivation up. I think whatever it is, like if you're into flat earth, tell me all about it. But after 5 minutes of you talking, we're hitting the record button and we're going in, because now you're in your zone. Where, self-producing, I'm always in my zone. This is my zone. And so understanding and appreciating the effect that has on the music I make, especially with our Theatria's second record we did at a different studio, with Adam Newcomb, who's delightful. I love him. He's an amazing producer, amazing person. That space wasn't mine when I was there, though, when we were recording with him. And I feel like that showed in the result. It wasn't his abilities as a producer. It wasn't our abilities as musicians that sort of made that EP we did sort of come short of where we wanted it. It was facilitating that creative space, which is something I learned not as a producer. I learned that as being an artist and then carried that forward into my production. I think that that's played a huge role. And then also being the songwriter TM, which over time within Theatria, I'm less and less of that guy. But at a time, I was that guy. So understanding that that is a dynamic and that's not inherently unhealthy. And it's not something that band member should be frustrated about. It's something the band should embrace. It's not that, the guitarist, it's usually the guitarist is the guy. It's not that the guitarist isn't open to your ideas. It's that this band's sound is his voice. And until you're on the same page as him creatively, or until you evolve to a place where everyone's input is on that same page equally, sometimes it's best to just embrace that. And so a lot of my work, production-wise, isn't even the recording and the tones and the mixing. It's the band sociology and working with everyone's just basically ego management. And, helping the main songwriter learn that it's not bad. It's not that their bandmates are lazy. It's just fate has decreed that you're the dude or the girl. But in my experience, that happens less. And maybe that's more to do with misogyny and in greater band culture, which is a whole hour-long discussion on its own. But just understanding that, if you're the person, just be the person. Because a lot of bands will fight in the studio, about this one person getting all their ideas get to become full songs, Why Don't Mind, stuff like that. So yeah, it's helped me understand band dynamics by having to do it with my own band and having that extra layer of I'm also I'm the producer and the songwriter and the mediator of that dynamic. It kind of recording other bands is on easy mode because I get to be removed. I have that layer of separation where I'm the producer, but I'm not the dude. So I get to more objectively look at the dynamics and help make people feel that their involvement is important because it is. If it wasn't, then all 5 of them, wouldn't be in here making the record.
Yeah, that's a solo project.
Exactly. And making sure that's communicated and understood. Because I have my own solo projects and I have Theatria, and I cannot do Theatria alone. I can't do it. I've put out my own music and it's not as good. It's just not as good.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, you look at pop songs and they have 5, 10, 15, 20 writers. They're collaborating. And that's something on a recent episode we did with Chad Kual, number 78, the inside scoop on top lining. If you want to check that out, it's at bandhive.rocks/78. We had a follow-up Clubhouse chat with him about the episode. And one of the things that he talked about when he's writing for top lining, which if you haven't heard the episode yet and you don't know what top lining is, for the listeners, it's writing vocals and melodies for EDM songs. And what he was saying, he loves to collaborate with other artists because he'll learn, what somebody in Germany writes or what somebody in Ireland writes or what somebody in Japan writes. And they have their own cultural background that influences how they write music. And because of that, he is now getting a wider knowledge of music writing from around the world. And I think that's amazing. Even on the smaller level of if you're in a band and you're all in the same town or the same area, you grew up listening to different music. You're not all carbon copies of each other. Everyone has value. There's probably going to be somebody who is a better songwriter than the rest of the people, but that doesn't mean the input doesn't matter. I think that's an awesome point for you to share, that making people feel comfortable makes them do better work. They're going to feel better. And then the mood is going to be better and they're less likely to fight with each other. And it's like a chain reaction of make people happy. They make other people happy. Those other people make more people happy. It just goes down the line. So, man, that's great. And to me, at least, I see a nugget in there for self-producing artists, which is if you're self-producing and you're not a producer yourself, you're just self-producing because you have to. You don't have the budget or the means to go to a studio to hire Todd or to hire anybody. Learn that lesson that Todd just told you, because that is going to make a better final product for you and your band. Unless, if you're a solo project, I guess it doesn't apply as much, but maybe you need bandmates. Maybe that's what it means. It depends.
That's what happened with Theatria. It started as me in a empty apartment. And, I had a conversation with Brandon, who's our bass player, while I was making this thing. And it became evident to me, this thing I am trying to do is bigger than me. Not to say Theatria is the biggest band of all time, but it's just on a creative level. I can't do it alone. I can't. And that was a big awakening for me because I was done with being in bands, I thought. And then Theatria happened, and that was 10 years ago. So
Yeah. Well, Todd, man, thank you so much for joining us and talking about production and Theatria and all the little rabbit holes I decided to take us down, like lima beans.
well, thanks a lot for having me. This has been awesome.
Yeah, agreed. This is a blast. I'm looking forward to the song dropping. And for those who haven't heard it yet, it's a really killer song. And I'm also looking forward to the album. So before we wrap this up, do you have any final notes you want to share with the audience? Any final thoughts? Any shout outs? Any links? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm just going to leave one little nugget that's sort of related to one of my earlier little lessons of being kind. Be kind to yourself. It's so easy to get caught up in the marketing semantics and the creative process and managing relationships and all this stuff. If you need to take a day, take a day. If you need to take two, take two. The world will move on without you, and that's a good thing. You need to be okay with that impermanence. So that's my last little thing I want to say to the audience as an overarching lesson. But if you like what you're hearing coming out of my mouth here, feel free to check out my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Todd Barriage. That's TODD BARRIAGE. I'm also on Instagram, instagram.com/Todd Barriage, or just username Todd Barriage. And then my band Theatria is on Instagram at Theatria Band, and on Facebook, simply Theatria, which is THEATRIA, like the Atria, but that was already a band, so we made it one word.
Oh, nice. We were the Atria.
Almost. That was a good Sharks joke.
Yeah. I had to throw that in. I'm not even going to sidetrack. Just look up We Were Sharks and their story if you're interested in what we're talking about. All the links Todd just dropped will be in our show notes at bandhive.rocks/81. So if you want to check them all out, just head there and you can click them all rather than typing them all in with, if you're like me, fat thumbs on a tiny screen. It's easier to just click stuff on a page. So bandhive.rocks/81. Dude, it's been a blast chatting with you. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.
Man, you too. Thanks.
That does it for this episode of the Band Hive Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. And of course, big thanks to Todd Barriage of Theatria for coming on the show to talk about self-producing and marketing and being a producer to make a full-time living off of creativity where maybe the band wouldn't support that, but he is able to do what he loves to do. That is amazing, and I think it's a really valuable lesson for any artist to learn. So thank you again, Todd. Super awesome for anyone who's really looking to make it in music. Even if it's not with your music, there is a path for you. So that said, remember to check out Todd's new song with Theatria, Daddy Issues, is out in just a couple days after this episode releases. The episode's original air date is June 15th, and the song drops on June 18th. So go check that out, pre-save it on Spotify, do what you gotta do. It's an amazing song. I've heard it already. This is like 3 weeks before the release, and it sounds like some of my favorite bands. So please go check it out. And also, feel free to join us if you have questions, want to chat about self-producing or business in general or any of that stuff. Please join the Band Hive Facebook group. You can find it by searching for Band Hive on Facebook or going to better.band/group, which will automatically redirect you to our Facebook community. There's lots of great people in that group, including Todd himself, and he loves to share knowledge there. So I'm sure if you show up with questions about production or marketing, Todd might be one of the people replying to your question. So please, like I said, feel free to join us. You can find us by going to better.band/group or searching for Band Hive on Facebook. We'll be back with another new episode next Tuesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Really looking forward because we have another amazing guest lined up for that one. And we plan on keeping him coming for as long as we can. So that will be next Tuesday at 6 a.m. in your favorite podcasting app. Until then, have an awesome week, stay safe, and of course, as always, keep rocking.